Good morning and welcome back to another episode of the DD Geopolitics podcast. I am your host, Sarah Bills, and I am here back by very popular demand, none other than Marwa Osman. How are you, Marwa? Ramadan
I'm
Kareem.
doing. Thank you, Ramadan Mubarak, for you and your loved ones and everyone who's listening to us and who's not listening to us. Hopefully, this holy month brings some peace to the well-deserved people of Gaza.
So, Marwa, you have a new show. I don't think we've talked about it on here. So, why don't you let our listeners, because you've done Midwest Stream on Press TV, and if you guys aren't watching that, please watch that. But Marwa, you have a new show. So, why don't you
Yeah.
tell our listeners a little bit about that show?
So I had the Mideast stream. It's episode 254 this week. So it's been going on for more than 4 years now, and it's a geopolitical show about West Asia in specific. And we're now preparing episode 8 for Expose. And Expose is basically a social media show slash exposing Western mainstream media, whether it's written or broadcast or via social media, with some statistics and some voices from TikTok, Instagram, whatnot. So we're following up on what's happening on social media, starting obviously with Gaza. We have inserted some other topics, but Gaza is our main, because we have thousands, not hundreds, thousands of stories that that are being exposed, that were spewed on Western mainstream media as being facts, but they are being exposed not even by us only, not even by the camp that is an anti-Zionist pro-Palestinian camp, even by the Israeli entity media itself. For example, the New York, basically, I think it was a big scandal. I think it's one of the biggest scandals in the history of New York Times, with for example, the piece that they published about the mass rape that supposedly the Palestinian resistance, Hamas, conducted on October 7, when they spoke to one of the settlers who supposedly was killed, but it ends up being a female soldier who was killed, and they say that she was raped, and they take eyewitness report from her parents, but now their parents are suing, and they're talking in the Israeli media saying that they never said that. They never said that their kid was actually raped. So that's the New York Times. So go figure what other mainstream media have been telling the public, and all of them are lies.
Well, what's interesting about the New York Times story, and I hope that people notice this because this was a really big scandal, is that instead of the story kind of dying, we have the main story in the New York Times from an IDF or IOF personnel, really,
Yeah.
and then
Written by a former intelligence officer in the Israeli occupation forces, who has no prior experience nor history in writing reports or op-eds, for that matter.
No, neither of them were journalists. And instead of letting the story kind of die, I was trying to show people, like, here, look, now every other publication is using the New York Times article as a source and publishing their own.
Yeah.
So it just kind of becomes like a Ouroboros of misinformation, and it doesn't stop, even though the New York Times have stopped kind of pushing that.
Yeah. So that's an example of what we cover on Expose, and you can see it on all social media, and obviously on Press TV's application, because I don't think some Western countries allow presstv.ir to open, so you can find the application and download it, because freedom of speech is only for the colonial imperial powers. It's never for the natives. So there you go.
No, free speech for me, none for thee, none for the brown people. So we are going to talk more about social media campaigns in a little bit. So I'm glad that we were talking about Expose. But first, the conflict has escalated in the southern border of Lebanon. We all understand that. What is the shift followed Israel's decision to expand its targeting? It was hitting Hezbollah sites and their logistics units that were previously untouched. This is a break. This is breaking from the traditional rules of engagement. So, and then Hezbollah kind of responds in kind. How should we expect to continue? How this continuation will go on the southern border as Israel kind of continues to extend this conflict, because things in Gaza aren't really going so hot?
Let me tell you one thing first, that the only documented Hezbollah territory that we have evidence that was hit was in the first week of November in one town in southern Lebanon called Kaunin. And we have evidence of that because of the aftermath of the Israeli entity bombardment, what happened to the weapons that started exploding. But other than that, and I mean it, you could do the research. Other than that, there's no documented evidence that Zionist Israel actually was able to at least effectively harm any infrastructure for Hezbollah. But what they have successfully done is kill civilians. Definitely, they have killed so far 300 Hezbollah fighters in the field, in their houses. So what happened is the number of Hezbollah fighters who have now passed away on the road of Al-Quds. Obviously, we are very proud of them, but they have passed by not in military activity, not on the field, not on the front line. In their houses, many of them with their own families. So what Zionist Israel was doing was waiting for them to go back home to kill them all. That's new. That's a new level of cowardice. You can be a coward, but you can never go beyond the level of being a Zionist coward. Killing babies and women safe in their own homes just to get back at Hezbollah. Because guess what? Hezbollah can play the same game, but they decide not to. They only retaliate against civilian targets when Zionist Israel bombs and kills civilians on our side. And what the Zionists have been effectively escalating is the usage of drones to assassinate certain targets. Now, some of these targets are a big loss for their communities and for the resistance. Obviously, there's some of them who are very, very important engineers and leaders in their own battalions, and that's a big loss, obviously. But this is a war; it's not a game. Hezbollah understands that. But on the other side now, talking on what's happening on the Zionist side, on the numbers that you can read, whatever the censorship out of the IOF allows to be written and spoken of on media, you can just see the numbers. If you compare basically the number of military operations conducted by the resistance, which have, by the way, surpassed 1,060 operations since October 8th, 1,060. Each of these 1,060 were directly hitting military targets, unless they were, a couple of them or more were retaliatory against settlements because civilians were killed in Lebanon. But what I mean is, for example, like just mentioning one, is the Meron Air Base. And I think that was one of the most astonishing, unprecedented hits that Zionist Israel received from a resistance faction ever. That is. Meron Air Base is one of two of the biggest military bases in Zionist Israel. You have Ramon in the south and Meron in the north. And Meron is 7 kilometers away from the border with Lebanon. And it's on a very high hilltop on a mountain, and it was hit the first time with 60 missiles. 42 of them were a direct hit, and since then it has been getting hit every time. And there's evidence. You could see a video footage for the resistance. Now, what was new, what was happening for the past month, is now we're watching the new weapons of Hezbollah, where you can watch the guided missile being launched and then changing direction to hit the target that the resistance fighter wants to be hit. So I think this is what Zionist Israel was not anticipating, because, they have the air power usually using their jet fighters, the F-16 jet fighters, like what we saw them do, for example, in Baalbek last week, which is the city in the Beqa region in Lebanon, which is 110 kilometers away from the border with occupied Palestine. We also saw them use the F-16 jet fighters in Saida, in the Ghazi area, where they bombed industrial sites belonging to privately owned companies, like, for example, the if I'm not mistaken. It's called the Infinite company. It's a motor generator company, and it's owned by a person who lives in Ghazi and who's initially from the Ghazi area. And the Israeli media claimed that they targeted Hezbollah facilities, but every media out there, CNN was there, taking video footage and evidence and looking at the damage that was caused. Added to that, the official Lebanese authorities investigation report that specifically says there was nothing related to the resistance that was targeted. It was purely evil, purely targeting civilian areas. So what was unprecedented for the Zionists is now the guided missiles that are being launched and that are not being captured by the Iron Dome that cost the Zionist entity hundreds of millions of dollars to be installed. So we're talking about a new kind of warfare, new ways of using weaponry that was never used before, similarly, for example, to what is happening in Yemen, them using ballistic missiles against ships or U.S. Navy battleships that never happened before. You could watch 60 Minutes and listen to what the highest ranking officer in the U.S. Marines in the Middle East was telling 60 Minutes. You could hear it from him. So the same thing is happening in Lebanon, and the level of escalation, despite the fact that Zionist Israel has been taking it deeper into Lebanon, but still away from the capital, gives out a sense of deterrence. There's still, both sides are still basically deterred from escalating, because to be honest, none of them really want a big scale war, because it might end up both sides losing a lot, but Zionist Israel will be losing more here because they are a conventional army. Their bases are well known. The strategic points in Tel Aviv are well known. Lebanon, it's considered a third world country only when it has to do with economics and infrastructure, but when it has to do with heroes who are ready to die for their country, we are definitely a first world.
Thank you for that. So before we get into the Twitter campaigns, you mentioned that you're working with people that are popular on TikTok. The United States is flipping out, fear-mongering over TikTok, trying to get them to divest from the CPC. Now we know that they actually just want to divest from the CPC and then sell it to their Israeli friends in AIPAC. So how will that affect things in the outside world? And how detrimental could this really be for our information war?
Well, that's now, the ball is in the court of the Chinese companies that own TikTok. And ever since I realized that TikTok is causing a lot of allergies for the APAC and the US, I decided to actually have a TikTok account. I didn't have one before. And I now pledge in front of you all that I'm going to start using my TikTok account to expose the Zionist entity, and by the way, exposing them is us just telling what's happening, reporting the news, basically, because the Western media never reports what's really going on. So despite the fact that I really despise this social media platform, because I think it's such a waste of time. But me being the millennial that I am, think that. But at the same time, being the reporter that I am and the broadcaster that I am, I think that it's very important for me to be there, especially because it's causing allergies for the APAC and the Zionists. But it is a big question for people in the West. This is something that the Western audience should open their eyes to and start thinking and asking questions about, because what does really freedom of speech mean? Because when we say freedom of speech and freedom of expression, we tend to forget about Julian Assange. We tend to forget about having platforms where anyone can use to express what they're feeling, what they're going through. I mean, I saw there's this account on Twitter, on X. It's called, I think, the OSMAN Defender, and he was saying that he was blabbering that TikTok is a Chinese communist, whatever. And someone and replies and says, well, Twitter actually also allows freedom of speech, and he says, well, no, Twitter is an American platform. What do you mean? I mean, okay, McDonald's is an American company. Who cares? I mean, iPhone is an American company. I would never even hold an iPhone, even if you would give it to me and give me money over that to hold it. I would never hold it. That's something, a principle for me. But when it comes to freedom of speech, it's not for you to tell us when, where, or how to express what is happening in our lives. I mean, if I don't have the freedom to express what I feel and what kind of a trauma my kids go through anytime there's an F-16 in my sky, in my airspace, then why am I on social media? The last thing that I want is to be on social media. Trust me, I'm an introvert. I don't like people. I don't like going out. I don't like talking to people. But basically, this is my job. I like talking to the camera. I don't like talking to humans. So I really hate the fact that I am sometimes obliged to interact, but they push you into telling what's going on, and they push you into becoming part of this social media world, despite the fact that it's such a nerve-wracking world. It's not a healthy place to be. But if you can control it, put certain effort into it, time manage your working time on it, I think it can be very effective and very helpful to educate the masses, tell them what's really going on, and show them the picture right from where it's happening, live reporting from the ground.
Well, that's not okay. I mean, TikTok is the perfect platform for Americans because it's bite-sized, quick news, really kind of loud and obnoxious. So it's not surprising that and they've said it in our Senate, they've said we don't have enough control over what happens on TikTok, which tells me that there's a lot of control over what happens on Twitter, which is interesting. So
yeah. A lot of accounts, Sarah, were posting about data and statistics coming from TikTok showing that 81, I think it was 81.5 million hashtags for Free Palestine over a certain period of time. And that really scares the elite, the people in power. What scares them is when this audience will be informed, will be educated to what is really going on. I mean, if what baffles me is that I think it's 53 or 54% of the American public are Christian evangelics. And what really baffles my mind, blows my mind, is that these Christians don't even know that if they themselves, the hardliners, supporters, biggest fans of Zionist Israel, if they want to take that journey and go to Bethlehem, where Jesus Christ was born, they should be expecting Zionists spitting on them while they walk down the streets, because this is what they do. This is what they have been doing in Jerusalem, in around Al-Aqsa Mosque, around the Church of Sepulchre, around the Church of Resurrection in Bethlehem. Please don't believe me. You can go and do your own research and see what's happening. Yet those same Christians are Zionists, more the Zionist Israelis themselves. And this is what makes us here as natives of West Asia don't understand. But when you really understand how the mainstream media works in America, and how the voting system works in America, and how the education system works in America, you completely understand why the public are clueless. Because you, in comparison between the US and Europe, Sarah, you could see that European public are more educated and more well trained to not believe the media and to try to find alternatives in compared with the American public. And this is a disaster. And what TikTok did is it brought to the household of the normal American citizen news that he has never seen before, information that he has never learned before, even certain historical facts that he was taught in school that ended up being absolutely only in American textbooks. So this was a very big threat for the elite forces, for the capitalist colonialist forces who tend to control the masses in order for their agenda to pass by smoothly, and hence they can change wherever they want with policymakers, with the higher court, with drafting new laws, etc., and whatnot, while the public is completely worn out and busy in something else. For example, like life of celebrities. You don't see that anywhere else except in America.
Oh, it's embarrassing to say the least. The celebrity thing. So we're gonna get into the next facet of this kind of social media disaster. So well, we aside from the crisis at Rafah, what has now started to happen is a campaign of airdrops across, I guess, northern Gaza. They sometimes they don't even know where they go. It seems to be
They
mostly.
washed up right here, by the way. They washed up in
I
Sur, in
heard.
Tyre, in a little bit. Yeah, they
Yeah,
washed up
friend
here.
from Lebanon said there we have got the
210 kilometers away from Gaza.
my friends in Africa found aid for Gaza in their in their nation. So we have Egypt, UAE, Jordan, and the United States. I think that this is just providing public relations covers for countries that are actually more directly involved in the actual genocide. Why do you think what is your assessment on the airdrop aid for Gaza? Is it detrimental? Is it positive? Is it a net positive? Is it helping Palestinians? Or should we be focusing on Rafah? I'm getting kind of tired is this, and I think you might agree, is this pacifist sort of activism when we need violent and armed resistance. So what do you think about these sort of hashtags and feel good campaigns like airdrop aid for Gaza, which we've seen the successes of the airdrops?
But what successes? Basically, we've seen airdrops killing people. We've seen airdrops dropping on the heads of starving civilians. We've seen airdrops that are completely expired food dropped by the U.S. Air Force. We've seen aid dropped by Jordan right in the sea in February, where people had to dive in February to try and find something to eat. And at the end of the day, they either couldn't or they couldn't get there, or whatever they got, they had to. It was like the Hunger Games. I mean, what kind of more humiliation do you think the Palestinian people can go through so this feel-good campaign can be successful in the eyes of those activists who are absolutely ignorant? I'm not saying these people don't have the heart in the right place. Who am I to say these people do not have the heart in the right place? What I'm saying is they're simply ignorant, and I'm not offending anyone. I'm saying that don't understand the politics involved in starving and in the genocide of Gaza. Whoever was involved in pleading for the Jordanian regime to airdrop food aid, لا قولوا عن جد, seriously, you're asking Jordan, the same Jordan that's dropping any kind of drone going to bomb Zionist Israel to try to suppress them against fighting the Palestinian people, the same Jordan that has blockaded the entire border with the occupied West Bank and not allowed any form of resistance to flourish in the area, to at least try to stop the aggressiveness of the Zionist entity, the same Jordan who is literally part of the Israeli Zionist Amman intelligence agency. That's whom you're pleading to. You're pleading to the king who wore his nice costume and went up in the air to drop food that killed humans, dropping food that is less than a truck, less than one truck, when you have thousands of trucks just parking outside of Rafah. The Egyptian border with Gaza is 13 kilometers long. We're not talking about the actual borders with the illegal colonial settlements where Zionist Israel would allow international companies to enter with the trucks, whether from the east or from the north, to get the food aid and the medicine, the medical equipment needed, and the medical aid needed to the people of Gaza. We're just talking about Egypt, 120 million Arabs and Muslims supposedly living there, having iftar right now in Ramadan. Who are they worshiping? What God are they worshiping? Definitely not the same God that I worship. Because if I want to sit here seeing my brothers and sisters dying, starving, being killed every time they leave from one place, get displaced to another, they get bombed, and now they're getting food packages dropped on them, which ended up being shoes and cat food that washed up entire in South Lebanon right here, then please don't mind me. I'm not a Muslim anymore if I want to sit and watch this happening and not say a thing. I have nothing to gain from this. What I have to gain is my self-respect and my piety to the Lord that I, God forbid, worship, because I don't think that what they worship is the same God that I worship. When you see your own neighbor being brutally butchered, killed, babies being, fetuses being killed inside the wombs of their parents, orphans, thousands, and that's what kills me, thousands of young people, young kids without mothers and fathers, and it's Ramadan. People don't understand what Ramadan is, what family is, what sitting around the table at the end of the day with the love, with that warmth that comes with the feeling of having your family around you, having a warm meal at the end of the day. These kids have nothing to wear. They have nothing to eat. They have no one to hug them. And yet Egyptians sit there watching the people of Gaza get butchered, besieged, and killed, watching a genocide happen. You could say that, well, they can't do anything. It's the Egyptian regime. If not, now is the time to at least protest. Least thing that they could do, protest against that regime. Protest in front of Rafah border for these officers of the Egyptian army to open the border. Then what kind of a life as Muslims are they heading? What kind of a life as Coptic Christians are they heading? Do they really know Jesus Christ if they sit aside and not help those who are in need? Do they really know Prophet Muhammad if they sit aside while seeing their brothers and sisters of Islam being butchered and killed? What kind of an nonsense charade is that? Airdropping food? Open the borders. What are you waiting for? Make you're pleading for the Jordanian king. Plead for the Egyptian president to open the border. Miss White Lady talking to us from London. I used to have respect for them. I don't anymore. Because what you did is you made sure that whoever was left from the bombing campaign was killed because of that aid. And we all saw the trucks that were brought in by the Zionist entity, by the way, in the northern part of Gaza, how Zionist Israel actually portrayed to the whole world. They put out the video where they bombed the people trying to get to the aid. We all saw the footage of the man who was squashed by the Merkava tank. We all watched his body. We all watched the insides of his body outside, laying on his ground, on his maternal land. We saw that. No one did a thing. The only people that are doing something, and I say it while I am proud and have nothing to lose, absolutely nothing to lose except my self-respect if I don't say it. The only people who should be put on everyone's head, respected and bowed to, are Hezbollah in Lebanon, Ansarullah in Yemen, and the Iraqi resistance forces. Point. That's it.
Well said. And that's kind of what has been frustrating me. You mentioned the thing about the UK and Jordan is that we have people from the West going over to Jordan, making it into a spectacle, talking to the king. They didn't. They talked to the Twitter account holder, and then taking credit for these airdrops, which subsequently killed people. Not only that, but now we have incremental violence attached to the airdrops and the aid, because they had that huge massacre of 100 people, the Flower Massacre, and now they just keep having little massacres. And because they're not as big as the initial one, they really don't get that much credit or that much airtime. So now we're just having more and more massacres over aid. Well, exactly. That's why I loved your post. We should have pulled it up. You said, listen up, you gringo. I said, what is Marwa? She's calling people gringos. Marwa's speaking Spanish. She's so upset.
Well, that's because of my lovely trip to Havana. My lovely friends and comrades taught me how to speak with these kind of people. Because look, again, I say, it's not because of they have something ill in their hearts. It's because they are simply ignorant of what things are, how things are organized and planned and executed when it has to do directly under the noses of the Israeli entity. How do they really think that plane actually took off from Jordan and just dropped the aid in Gaza? It has to stop in Zionist Israel. Don't believe me? Go and read the Israeli entity media. It has to be stopped. It has to be totally inspected, agreed and approved by the Zionist entity to be dropped over Gaza. So it has to go through the colonial power, the power that is effectively committing a genocide in Gaza. Look, we can put all that aside. But what really hits deep, Sarah, is that these activists, I think they have a fetish to see Palestinians hungry, starving, happy to see some food aid, happy to see some medicine, a bit ill, a bit hungry, malnourished with famine, not having enough maybe a power or energy to go through the day, and then say, oh no, we should help them. You know what helps them? Buy them a bullet. That's what helps them. Stop condemning the resistance. That's what helps them. Stop saying that, oh, what happened? We don't condone what happened on October 7. We condemn Hamas, but please stop shooting. But we will never condemn Hamas. Hamas has every right to defend its own right of existing, resisting the occupation and protecting the people of Gaza, just like the Jenin brigades, just like the Lions then in the West Bank. They have every right to protect themselves. They are living under occupation in 2024. What would you do, Miss Gringo, if someone comes knocking at your door, grabs you, pulls you outside, takes your house, takes your land, takes your money, takes your trees, takes everything that belongs to you, and then incarcerates you and not only just incarcerates you, bring down the family houses, not only take your house, but bring down and destroy what is left of the family houses and tell you it is not yours. I was here before 2,000 years ago. How would you feel about it? Would you resist or not? Would you stand there, hold a card and say, please let us protest? You would shoot them right in the face, wouldn't you? Or it's halal for you and haram for us. Has it not been for the resistance in Lebanon, where would I be today? Where would I be today? I'm from the last town in South Lebanon on the border with Palestine. Has it not been liberated because of the heroes of the resistance? Where would I be right now? My father was incarcerated by the Israelis. My father-in-law was killed by the Israelis. My uncle was incarcerated by the Israelis. Most of them have now diseases that are long-term diseases because of what they handled in that detention centers. What do you expect is happening right now to the Palestinians? We were celebrating the release of the Palestinians at the beginning of the fierce ceasefire, but what was happening was that Zionist Israel on the other side was re-incarcerating other people. More than 5,000 people have been incarcerated since October 8th. No one talks about them. More than 30 people were killed inside of the prisons of the Israeli entity detention centers. No one talks about them. Killed, why? Because they were hit on the head, deliberately hit on the head by the detention center management, if you will. So why is no one talking about this? Why are we hiding behind our fingers and allowing Zionist Israel to freely get whatever they want from the EU, the NATO, and the US, any weapon? They are trying new weapons on the Palestinian people, Habibi. They are trying new weapons, testing them on the Palestinian people. It's okay for them to get weapons from the United States of America, but it's haram. It's a terrorism if Hamas gets weapons from, God forbid, Syria or Iran to defend themselves. But halal for Zionist Israel to get those weapons, those top-notch weaponry, sometimes not even tested before, to test them on us. It's halal for them. Why? Why? Is it because they are white? Is it because they are Europeans? Is it because they are colonial powers? Is it because they are not even from this land, so they don't care if they decimate the entire land? Why? Why are we supposed to sit here, watch what's happening, and then plead to the puppet regimes that were installed by those colonial powers? Nah, we're not going to do that.
Well, let's talk about that, because we have seen, and especially after these airdrops kind of came in, we were really critical about, I've been really critical about Jordan, because I see people taking these strange angles where they're very anti-Iran. And this is why I really hate these airdrops, is because I'm saying, my colleague and I are constantly trying exactly what you said. The only country really helping Palestine palpably is Iran and Lebanon via the resistance forces. And
when you hear such a rhetoric, I advise you, Sarah, to ask one question. What has Iran done so bad that you hate it so much? Genocide? Have they occupied someone? Have they invaded someone? Have they stolen their resources? Have they effectively committed genocide, massacres? What did they do? Just give us the information that you have. What did they do? What did they do? Mahsa Amini, she was killed because of an illness. You don't want to believe? Don't believe. Find a wall, hit your head with it. Never believe. We don't care if you believe or not. What do you have against Iran except one thing? It refuses to normalize with Israel. It helps any kind of native resistance stand on its feet and fight back. Righteousness. It stands with what is right. It stands with the natives against colonialists. If that is what is really bothering you, then look in that mirror again. You're no longer an activist. You are an active agent of the empire.
That's a really good point. And you mentioned activists, which is something that is incredibly frustrating. We keep mentioning, like, we're not saying that these people are inherently bad people or that they're operating necessarily maliciously, but the ignorance is it can be so detrimental. So how can we speak to kind of this bleeding heart activism with no geopolitical knowledge that actually causes more harm than good? We're petitioning the King of Jordan, who then uses these as photo ops and hype videos, while in the same breath, these same people are trashing the IRGC and Iran, and really not even mentioning Hezbollah. And forget about Syria. God forbid you even mention Assad, because then it's a whole nother can of worms that you've opened with these westernized people. And I'm wondering where do we go from here? Well, we need to utilize their activism because that's important, but how do we steer them properly when this is all said and done and the activists are still here? We can't rely on Jordan to give us diplomatic solutions to these issues. So how do we stress to them?
I go with the strategy of ignore and amplify. Ignore those who are basically going around in circles, not bringing any healthy debate, not even helping the Palestinians. Amplify the voices of the Palestinians in the West Bank and in Gaza. That's the strategy that I've been using. Ignore and amplify, because I cannot tell you the trolling that I was literally talking to myself. It's my Twitter account. I have every right to have my opinion. If you don't like my opinion, unfollow me. You can gladly block me, but you cannot come and lecture me as to what I can or cannot say. What I say comes from direct data that I collect from the people in Gaza that are right now displaced from their homes. Their families have been killed. They are starving. I talk to them and on a daily basis to try and find out what's really going on, because I don't even believe 90% of the media that comes out of Gaza, because it's controlled media. I believe the people. Even some of the influencers who were, by the way, taken out of Gaza for some reason, who were popular influencers for some time, I don't really believe those either, because when you are living under occupation for that long, and we have 2.5 million humans besieged in the biggest open-air concentration camp on earth, and you don't even mention the right to resist, which is, by the way, wholly in any international law, in any constitution of a free and sovereign people. You don't mention that, then I have every right to question your agenda, to question who you are working for, to question what really do you want? What kind of a message are you propagating from the videos or the posts that you are writing? I only believe the people of Gaza. Whatever they say is what is right, because I'm not under bombs. I was, and I got displaced to a safer area. They did not find a safe area. Zionist Israel keeps pushing them south and bombs them again. So they know what's happening. And believe me, when you hear them speak, sometimes it gets too depressing because you're watching, but from afar. But at the same time, feeling bad because you can't really help. Sometimes I wish I just can hug one of those babies who lost their mothers, and I can't. So that makes me fall into deep depression. And I start trying to talk to my friends in Gaza, trying to make them feel well. And they end up making me feel well. They end up elevating me from my own depression. I mean, what kind of pious, persistent, resilient people are we talking about right now? Still being able to smile, crack a joke while they are under the most horrifying war, the most horrifying genocide to ever be recorded in the 20th and the 21st century. This is beyond what a human can tolerate. At the end of the day, you see them trying to tell you, we're here, We are resilient. We're not going anywhere. We support the resistance. We hear you. We see you, our brothers and sisters in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, in Iran, and in Yemen. We see you. We support you. Some of them are even, and it's very, very heartbreaking for me, some of them are repenting for ever standing against Syria. And what I say is I just go into the DMs and I start saying, please don't do that, because I know my Syrian brothers and sisters, they don't want to hear you say that, especially when you are right now basically under a genocidal war. Don't say that. When you're my brother, when you're my neighbor and my brother, we can solve anything, but not now. It's not the time for it. Don't even think about it, because they're thinking about the years that they were brainwashed because of the media, the Muslim Brotherhood media and the Zionist media that was playing on the nerves of the Arabs, trying to fracture them against one another. Now is not the time for that. Now is the time to focus on staying strong, staying resilient, and us trying to find a permanent solution for this. Because look, whatever they say about October 7, and despite what I think about October 7, which is, by the way, a very glorious day to me, but don't mind me. Don't listen to me. Whatever they say, nothing in the world makes what they did equal to October 7. Nothing. October 7 does not even come with an iota of what the Palestinians have been going through since not 1948, but since the early 1900s, when Israeli Zionist refugees were being kicked out of Europe and taking refuge in Palestine, and Palestinians were welcoming them. Since then, the suffering started since then. Not in 1940. 1948 was the announcement of the Zionist entity, the launching of the Zionist entity, but it all started before that. And these people have been suffering since then. And mind you, imagine what happened in the massacre of Deir Yassin. I think that there had been a prior genocide to this genocide, but history books and cameras that did not exist at that time in that specific area did not give it what it deserves, the attention that it deserves. We have numbers, we have names, but not all the numbers, not all the names, not all the photos. Basically, from the Deir Yassin massacre, I think the most that we have is 1,000 photos, and they were 3,000, but half of them was actually captured and destroyed by the Zionist entity, and the other half was basically just smuggled out of the 1948 territories into Beirut, and they are found somewhere here in one of the refugee camps, in one of the museums in the refugee camps. But other than that, what evidence do we have? Because they destroyed every evidence they could have their hands on. Now, fast forward to Gaza, 2023, 2024, on live TV, the world was watching, Sarah, and still nothing. We have passed day 160, and still nothing, not even a resolution in the UNSC, the mock, the charade. Not even a resolution. And the US tells you, Biden says we want to try and have a ceasefire, and then stop vetoing the ceasefire in the UNSC. The least that you could do.
It's not even like they'll abide by it, so it really doesn't matter. You can push the ceasefire,
but at least, Sarah, at least the United States would stand where its mouth is, because it's not doing that.
No, not at all. But we have really good news, sarcasm. The United States is going to build a new port in Gaza. It's amazing. Aren't you excited for this new trade route to Gaza? This amazing band-aid on the gushing wound that is the Palestinian genocide.
This is my excited face.
It's embarrassing. I'm embarrassed to even talk about it. How
I'm talking about a plan that was put forth by the Netanyahu government in 2014, when the bickering started with Lebanon concerning the Karish oil and gas fields in the Mediterranean, when Zionist Israel was started getting the results from drilling in the Mediterranean, where they found out that Lebanon has a vast amount of resources in the sea, and that Gaza has 3 times that amount in its own maritime borders. That same plan that they were planning with the United States of America back then to loot the resources of Gaza, or the other plan to try and take control, even further control of Gaza by putting Zionist feet again on the ground in Gaza with the help of some of the American boots on the ground as well. This is the plan. Aid. We want to wait 60 days, maybe 90 days for this pier or port to open the borders.
It's right
Open,
there.
يا عمي. Okay, build the pier. You're not going to listen to anyone. You're going to build the pier. Build the pier. Open the borders. What is wrong with them? What kind of an evil mind is obsessive about basically suffocating 2.5 million humans? They're no longer 2.5, by the way. We've lost at least 40 or 45,000 and more than 120,000. So they're minus 2.5 minus because of Zionist Israel and the genocide. But you know what's funny? Nothing is funny about this, but what's funny when it comes to social media is when I couldn't believe that I had to explain this to people, that this is about land grab and this is about Zionist boots on the ground and this is about incarcerating more Palestinian people in Gaza and this is about taking control of the resources in the land and the sea. I cannot believe that still I had to explain this for people, and some people come and say, no, it's for humanitarian purposes. Oh, please shut up, for the love of God. For the love of God. Yani, I couldn't understand what was going on, as if they haven't read what had happened just 20 years ago. What the US did to Iraq, 1.5 million humans killed.
It was
More
worth it.
humans are being killed every day in the Anbar province and the Fallujah province because of the mutation in the genes of the humans that are trying to breed, and their babies come either with one eye, one leg, or no face at all. Thanks to the big Uncle Sam and the weapons that they tested on the Iraqis. As if they haven't seen what the United States of America has done to Afghanistan, what they have done to Yemen, what they have done to Mali, what they have done to Libya that no one speaks about, what they have done to Sudan when no one is even reporting about this, deaths on a daily basis. No one reports about what kind of a check we pay, the bill that we have to pay just to make the colonial powers happy. Isn't it about time that the world just stands up and says, no more looting, no more killing humans for the sake of big corporations? When are the American public going to wake up and see that the system that governs them is one big system that is crushing the rest of the world just to make rich people richer? When? People might say that what's happening in Gaza has nothing to do with it. It has everything to do with this, because this is the heart of imperialism.
Well, then we come like kind of full circle, because now we're back to the activism with no political knowledge. So we're just focusing on the feel-good stories of Gaza, but we also have the greatest humanitarian crisis that we've ever experienced in history in Yemen, and we have a full-fledged civil war occurring in Sudan. Both Muslim majority countries, but we have these westernized sort of liberals, bleeding heart liberals that are just focused on Palestine. As long as you get one peanut butter jelly sandwich in there, it's considered a win. After that, we don't really know what happens. And this kind of needs to be addressed in the community, because it's a lot of aimless people that are just doing these feel-good campaigns and protests, and then they have no idea where to even go after the fact. Great, you've got the aid in, but you worked with USA to get it there. So now what? So what kind of alliances are you creating just by saying, at least we're getting the aid in? So
I was talking about this, Sarah. I think I was a bit confused, if I'm using the right verb here. I was a bit confused after I saw reports and tweets about the Oscars that took place in America. People were celebrating that some celebrities were wearing a pin, a red pin that was. What are you talking about? What are you? When you support Palestine, you support Palestine for yourself, for the sake of your own self-respect. You don't. I'm starting to lose my voice. You don't put yourself out there and tell us, flaunt to the entire world that, look at me, I'm supporting Palestine. That's the decent thing as a human being to do. What do you expect? Do you think that Palestinians in Gaza are now celebrating because I don't know who wore a pin to remember them? Or I don't know what kind of actor said that, oh, look, there was a protest. That's why I was late. Who cares? I can't use any profanity. It's Ramadan. I can't use it anyway. I'm a Muslim woman. But who cares? Who cares about all of this? I understand your frustration and that you need to go out in the that in the streets and try to express yourself. You should be doing this, but you're doing this for yourself. Don't think for a second that this is affecting the Palestinians positively in any way. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm not against activism. I'm all for activism, but activism aimlessly is literally nil, zilch, nothing. It's like breathing. It's like inhaling and exhaling. This is what you're doing. What you need to do is to pressure the people in power to make a decision. How do you pressure the people in power? You need me, a native who is being bombed, to teach you, supposedly a first world citizen, a citizen of a democratic, the only democracy in the world, the United States of America. You want me to teach you how to do a change in your own system that is governing the entire planet in such an evil way? They're governing you in an evil way, and you don't even know how to solve your own problems. You think by protesting you're going to solve the problems in the Middle East? You need to focus, sit down, and work together the same way the African Americans work together to snatch their freedom from the teeth of the white man. And I mean it. These African Americans throughout the Black history knew how they were being brought in as slaves from Africa, snatched from their cultures, from their communities, to work as slaves for the white man in the US. And it took them hundreds of years to collectively rise up. But how did that happen? It happened through education, through organizing, through knowing where to hit. And I don't mean using violence. Now people got to start saying that Marwa is inducing violence and promoting, but don't use violence, but hit where it hurts. And you would definitely know that what really hurts those in power is economics. Look at what Yemen was able to do in less than 3 months. They were able to put down the Israelis and the Americans down to their knees in the Red Sea because they were effectively targeting the economics. I'm not saying go ahead and bomb shipments in your own ports. I'm saying take your protests there and try to stop the shipments from leaving with the weapons inside of them. You know who did that and succeeded in that? Italians in the port of Italy, Spanish people in the ports of Spain. Read about it, how they were able to stop their own companies to sell weapons to Saudi Arabia to bomb Yemen, how the people were able, they succeeded in stopping them, how the workers who were supposed to unload the weaponry and put them on the shipment went on strike and said, we are not going to be complicit in crimes against humanity. This is what activism is. Waving a flag in front of the White House or pleading for regimes to drop in small cat food on starving humans is not what is helping the people of Gaza. You need to hit where it hurts. And where it hurts is money, economy, Wall Street, banks, companies, weapon companies, the military industrial complex. How can you effectively paralyze this connection? This is what activism is. Otherwise, it's nothing. It's like watching Sound of Music.
Well, I mean, I like musicals. They can be nice. I do have to ask this, and let me know if I'm overstepping a line, because this is something that I'm not very educated on. But one of our viewers asked, and I want to ask, what about the Lebanese Maronite Christians? I've encountered a few online, and they're kind of a mixed bag, and I don't really know kind of what their line of thinking is. What happens if the war enters into Lebanon? Does the whole
Terminology is very important, Sarah, and I don't like calling them Maronite Christians because our biggest allies in Lebanon, being a Shia Muslim, are Maronite Christians. So the people that we have a problem with are the Jaja affiliated Lebanese forces Christian Zionists. This is who we have a problem with. We don't have a problem with Maronites at all. The biggest example is Sister May Ziada, a nun who was last week kicked out of the school where she teaches at because she assembled the kids and told them, now we are going to pray for our beloved ones in South Lebanon and for our heroes in South Lebanon who are protecting us. She was kicked out because the Christian Zionists in Lebanon could not handle to see a nun being a true Christian, literally taking the words of Jesus Christ and applying them. These are the Maronite Christians of Lebanon. The Zionist Christians, on the other hand, are those who are calling us, as Shias, if you have seen the posts, Iranians or Zoroastrians or barbarians and terrorists, and they have been putting flags of or erecting pictures of synergy and coordination between Lebanon and Zionist Israel in their wildest dreams. They will never return back to the times of the 1975 to 1987 civil war in Lebanon, where these LF Lebanese forces, Jaja, Christian Zionists, were basically boots in the feet of Zionist Israel, doing on behalf of them the nastiest work, where they actually are behind the massacres of Sabra and Shatila. Because Zionists, by the way, did not enter until the Christian Zionists in Sabra and Shatila finished the job. They entered later on and killed whoever was left. They killed in less than 4 days 3,500 humans. More than half of them were Palestinians in Sabra and Shatila, and the other 1/3 were Lebanese Shia, people who lived in the area. These people, they sleep and dream about having the power of Zionist Israel. We have some of them going right now on TV saying that they actually support Israel. They're no longer afraid of the Lebanese law, the Lebanese constitution itself, which incriminates and it considers it a crime to support the people of Zionist Israel or the Zionist regime, or to flauntingly and overtly state out in public that they do support, and if there ever happens a war, they would stand with Israel. These people, they have an inferiority complex where they don't really understand where they're from. And the issue is, historically, they are from Damascus, they are from Syria. And if you tell them that, it's like shooting them with a laser in their groins. That's how painful it is for them. Why? Because they look down at Syrians, they look down at Palestinians, they look down at Muslims in Lebanon, and they're not really Christians, by the way. They don't really care about Christianity. They don't go to church. They don't care about the teachings of Jesus Christ or about his Holy Mother. They call me towelhead, and they refuse to see that I actually look like Virgin Mary more than they or their wives or sisters will ever look, because I actually respect myself and try to look like her, respect my words, respect my stances, believe in what's righteous, and not in me being above other humans. They think that they are chosen people the same way that the Zionists are chosen. These people are clueless, they are ignorant, and the most that they can do is blabber and squeal right on Twitter X or on Facebook. But other than that, trust me, in real life, we don't even see them. They don't exist.
And for myself, I'm going to ask this. So recently, another report came out vindicating Assad in yet another chemical attack. This one was not chlorine. This one was the mustard gas attack. Obviously not Assad's doing. This is the second one he's been absolved of. The other one was the big sarin attack. Obviously, the chlorine attack we've always known was fake. How do we go about rehabilitating Assad? Because especially amongst Western Muslims, he gets a lot of hate, and we need him as we move into multipolarity. He's not going anywhere, and we need him as a keystone leader in that region. how do we rehabilitate him for the Muslims and Arabs that have been kind of indoctrinated by Western propaganda and see him as this antichrist?
They can. There's a saying in Arabic where you can actually uh, paint the floor of the sea. You know, that's what they could do. They could find the deepest floor in the deepest sea and paint it. We don't need to rehabilitate anyone for anybody. This is who we are. This is who the Syrian people are choosing as their own president. You don't like it, find a wall and bang your head to it. You want to teach and educate people on how to be ruled? For the love of God, educate yourself on how to be ruled. Don't you even know how you are being ruled, how you are being controlled? Don't you even know that you don't even have control over what your own kids are being taught in school?
No.
Really? You want to come along and lecture us about how we should be choosing our leaders or how we should be electing our leadership or our governments? And at the same time, you are groveling at the feet of regimes, puppet regimes, kings and emirs who are installed since the 70s by colonial powers, and they have never left. Jordan is a democracy. The Emirates is a democracy. Saudi Arabia is a democracy. What do you have against Assad? What do you have against Syria that was self-sufficient until 2010? Every man, woman, and child had free healthcare. Every child had obligation of, they were obliged to have education until they finished school. They were self-sufficient in everything and they were selling their own resources. What did Syria do to them? Syria said no to normalization. This is what Syria did to them. And Syria said no to the US Treasury. You're not allowed to come into our system of banking in Syria. We are a sovereign state. This is what they said. I mean, if they come around, sit down and think like what intellectual human beings would do, then they are most welcome. They're our guests. Please do that. If they don't, حد ستين جهنم. They can go to the deepest end of hell and sit there.
Well, I don't. You're obviously losing your voice and getting exhausted from all my silly questions, so I won't ask anymore. But I do want to relate to you that the Yemeni people really wanted me to send my blessings to you and their love to you and to thank you. I talked to them this morning. I said, Marwa's coming on. They said, what? Tell her we love her. We are so proud of her. So I do want to pass that along. Why don't you tell our listeners about your Telegram, where they can find you, all the information, find you on Twitter. You're trolling people finally. You need to come into the spaces because these people need to be educated. Honestly, Marwa, I know we can be careful about who speaks to you and who has access to you, but these people, they need help.
I completely understand what you're saying, Sarah, but people need to understand that I have 3 kids and an entire life away from media. I am an assistant professor. I have students. I have tests. I have research papers. I have a life outside of social media. People just need to focus and remember that, because people sometimes they forget that they even have a family, and this is it gets me on the guilty side. You know, when you're a mother, you're always thinking that I'm not good enough. So if I go ahead and do that, I mean, at the moment I have my kids way back in their room where their door is closed so they wouldn't make any sound, so no one could hear them. So at the moment I already feel guilty, but I understand where you're coming from. And I want to go back to the issue of Yemen, and I want to shout out to my brothers and sisters in Yemen who have been nothing short of amazing. Not since now. I've been following the war on Yemen, the global war on Yemen, since it began in 2015, and following it closely. And I have so much respect. I have so much love. I have so much to look up to every man, woman, and child in Yemen. And from this platform, I give out a special shout out to Sayyid Abdul Malik al-Houthi and to the Ansarullah resistance movement, and to the Yemeni armed forces, and to the spokesperson Yahya Sari, whom we plead to please become the spokesperson of the entire axis of resistance. You have no idea how much your voice is important to us. And to the people in Yemen who are every Friday, tomorrow is Friday, tomorrow there are going to be millions of Yemenis in the streets again supporting Palestine. To each and every one of you leaving your houses during the month of Ramadan under the scorching sun to support Palestine, we love you, we support you, you are brothers, like we ride together, we die together. We are the goodest, the best of all natives on the planet until we die.
I really can't think of a better note to end this episode on, Marwa. It's always a joy. And now I'm fired up for the rest of the day. I don't need coffee on days I interview Marwa. I'm ready to go to the front.
Thank you, Sarah, for the opportunity. Thank you very much for the effort that you're doing.
Guys, we'll see you this weekend, probably with Esha K. Please visit ddgeopolitics.com. The website is launched and ready for PayPal payments. And we'll see you guys in a space probably right now. Thanks again, Marwa, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.